Call a rabbi, that's a woman, right? Rabbit. Rabbanit. So she made it up pretty much because there's no source of it prior to this one woman that wrote about it. There's no real source.
Yeah,
There's no real source. No, the source is somebody about 100 years ago. Rashi lived about 700 years ago, and about 100 years ago somebody rocked up and said it. Before then, there is no documented source that Rashi's daughter ever wore tefillin. Although there were certain very learned women out there. The wife of the Taz, the daughter of the Bach, was extremely learned. I've ever told you this story? I think I did tell somebody this story.
I would like to hear it.
You would like to hear it again? Well, you wouldn't be hearing it again. You would be hearing it for the first time. Yes. The Bach's daughter was extremely learned, and the Taz happened to be the most learned guy in the Bach's yeshiva. And there was always talk about the fact that because he was so learned and she was so learned and they should marry each other. However, he never necessarily agreed to the suggestion. Okay, one day he came into the Beis Medrash and he asked a question. He asked some question, I don't remember what it was, but a very complicated question, and no one in the entire room could answer the question. Okay, now, the Bach's daughter happened to be named Levana. That was her name, Levana, right? And so Levana stands up and says, by the way, I have an answer. And she answered the question perfectly. She was the only one in the whole room that could answer the Taz's question. So the Taz said, I think it's time to be Mekadesh de Levana.
Time to be what?
Mekadesh de Levana. Which it's actually a bit of a pun because Mekadesh de Levana can mean to sanctify the moon, but we use the word sanctify also to marry. Meaning when you marry somebody, you're Mekadesh the woman, right? You sanctify that woman for you, etc. And so it was a bit of a pun where he basically said, I think it's time to be Mekadesh de Levana. So it's like, yeah, Mekadesh de Levana could be praising the moon like we do once a month, but it could also mean to marry the Levana. So it was like a bit of a pun. I got them a little bit going. Kenai Nahara. All right, that's a little interesting story to begin the Talmud class. However, we're going to go now and understand what's going on. Now we're going to go into a third. For this week, we're going into a third time that we're going to go into an analysis that is a little bit deviating from the previous discussion. Okay, if you remember, the first discussion was essentially, should you make Kiddush on Shabbos day if you did not make Kiddush Friday night? And what we mean by Kiddush is not the Kiddush that everybody today makes on Shabbos day, but the Kiddush that you're meant to say on Friday night, which is the proper blessing for Kiddush. That is what you're meant to say on Shabbos day as well. All right?
What did you say?
The Kiddush, the same blessing that you would have said Friday night that you missed, you should say again Shabbos day. And we basically concluded that that was the case. Okay? We challenged him a little bit back and forth. We challenged his hypothesis that it's best to do a mitzvah in its time than to push it off. Even if you're going to gain something by pushing it off, you should still do the mitzvah when you're meant to do it and not later. Okay? That we actually mentioned, and we challenged that, but we pretty much he survived that challenge. Correct? He survived that challenge. Why? Because we said that there's a difference between, because we challenged him with the fact that hypothesis doesn't prove true when we say Saturday night. Saturday night we're pushing off the mitzvah to do Birchat HaMazon. And we said that's different because when you push off Havdalah, it shows that you are hesitating to leave Shabbos, whereas if you don't make Kiddush, if you don't sanctify Shabbat on Friday night, it shows that you're not readily accepting Shabbos, and therefore, on Friday night, it's best to do it as early as possible, whereas afterwards, you don't necessarily have to do that. All right? Good. I think that's, yeah. Now we go, the Gemara says, Shma mino miha masnisa tamni. There are 8 separate deductions that we're going to do right now from this previous Mishnah, from this previous Talmudic statement. We're now going, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go through we're going to go through 10 lessons that we're going to learn from this particular Brasadic quote. All right? 10 separate lessons. 8 separate lessons. Right? Which is going to show an extreme analysis on every detail of the Tanaic quote. Now, before we go into the 8 things that we're going to learn from the previous Tanaic quote, you have to try your best to remember that Tanaic quote. Yeah? Which Tanaic quote are we talking about?
You mean like
Oh, so Rashbam reminds us which Tanaic quote we're talking about. We are talking about the Tanaic quote, the previous one that starts on the 4th line of the page, Tanya. It says in a Braisa, Hanichnas lebeisav b'motzei Shabbos, somebody who enters his house on Saturday night, mevarech ala yayin, first you say the blessing on the wine, then on the candle, then on the incense, and then you make the Havdalah blessing on the cup. And if you do not have more than 1 cup, which means you only have 1 cup, then you save it and you do all of them together at the end. All right? Gut verstanden? Yeah. Where's all the people? Huh?
Why do they highlight the Rashbam in this Gemara?
Why do they?
Don't they?
First of all, in the older print, they didn't highlight anything. It was the later prints that they tried to make it an easier use. What's the user friendly, right? In the previous ones, they didn't, and it had a lot to do with the printing press and how it worked. It wasn't easy to just make small changes, right? Today, you want to make it when they wanted to bolden the all the beginnings of Rashi. You know what they had to do? They had to go to the computer, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just like mark them and hit bold, and that's it, and then hit print at the end. So, in the olden days, they would have to take a big, what they call a chase, and they used to have to open it up and start picking out 1 letter at a time and putting each letter back in, and that was extremely difficult, and therefore, sometimes it was a great idea that somebody thought to make it more user-friendly, but it was not cost-effective. Okay, it might be user-friendly, but not cost-effective, right? To repeat and do everything over and over. All right, Baruch Hashem. Thanks for joining. Let's continue. So now that particular quote, and I want to remind you that there's 2 separate concepts in that particular quote. One concept mentioned was the fact that you say Havdalah, the order that you say Havdalah, wine, fire, incense, and then the blessing on Havdalah. And the other one is that if you do not have more than 1 cup, you save it till after the meal and you do it all together. Now that Brasadic quote, which seems like, okay, how much could you learn out of it? But watch how the Gemara is going to deduce various different halachic rules out of that quote by picking apart certain inferences one by one. And each of these inferences is in essence a unique Talmudic discussion in itself. As a matter of fact, for those of you who look at Tosfos, you'll see that Tosfos, the entire page, Shmamina, 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 he's literally going to comment on each particular analysis and trying to go into each analysis and try to understand, yes, correct. He's going through, I'm not sure if he literally goes through each of them, but we have right here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the next page is 7. So 7 out of 8 of the analysis, he's going to discuss how exactly this was analyzed or deduced from this particular statement. Now we're going to start listing them. All right? Shmamino. We learn from here, Hamavdil b'tzvilot svarach sheyavdil alakois, that if you make Havdalah, if you make the ritual to end Shabbat, even though you said it verbally in the evening prayer, as it is set forth, according to the rabbis in the Siddur, in the prayer books that we have, right? It says the evening prayer, and in the evening prayer for Saturday night, it includes a Havdalah there, right? You're familiar with that? Ata choinan tanu. Right? Even if you say Havdalah in your prayer, you still need to say Havdalah on your cup. It's not good enough to say it in your prayer. You actually have to say it on the cup. Why? How do we know that? How do we learn that? How do we deduce this? Yeah?
So in Havdalah, he
So that's the order. First you bless on the wine, which means you say hagafen, and then you say on the fire besamim, and then or today we actually do it the other way around, but and then you do the actual blessing on Havdalah at the end.
But then why do I say on the cut? Like why do you say it says
What do you mean? What does it say?
it says
Meaning, while you're holding the cup, you hold the cup and you say the blessing. Yeah, you say the blessing while holding the cup of wine. Right? It's actually very common in Jewish rituals that you hold a cup of wine, you say the blessing, and you drink it at the end. Right? Even when we do a bris. You know, we're doing a circumcision, we chop little pieces off people's bodies, and then we empty the wine. Drink time.
Do you give to the baby one?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we give the baby wine, right? Don't tell, I don't know if we should put this on the internet. We could get in trouble for this, right? You know, the age of alcohol is in many countries either 18 or 21. We 8 days old, the kid gets a drink of wine. Can I know how to? Shh, don't tell anyone. Yeah, not a lot. Yeah, they actually dip, they usually dip like a napkin. No, they usually dip like a napkin or a gauze in the wine. They squeeze it out so there isn't that much. And they give a little bit to the baby. It actually says it helps because, especially the kosher wine that we usually use, well, they have a lot of different kosher wine today, but they have like the old sweet kosher wine. They actually said it helps the baby calm down. Even though it's a little bit of alcohol, it's not strong alcohol, a little bit of alcohol, but it's also very sweet, and you put it in the baby's mouth, and the baby drinks a little bit of the wine that for the blessing for his bris. So he's joining in the party, right? We train him young.
Yeah. Jewish
Yes.
alcohol resistance training.
Alcohol resistance training, very good. We remind you that when you get alcohol, it hurts. we make the connection, right? We just circumcised you, and now you drink alcohol. Now you should know what it's like when you drink alcohol.
No, you feel better.
Don't ever drink alcohol again.
No, it's the opposite. You feel better.
You feel better?
Yeah, you get the pressure hurts, and you drink alcohol, you feel better.
Yeah, but you associate the fact that alcohol goes together with the circumcision. So maybe in your mind, you're kind of like connecting the two.
Ask the baby next to the other bris.
Yeah. Anyways, weiter gegangen. You want another bris to have a drink of alcohol?
I'll bring the bris.
Yeah, we can. Good. Okay, let's continue. Where are we? Oh, so we're learning, the first thing that we learned here is that if you say the blessing in the prayer, you still have to say it on the cup, etc. Why do we know this? Because we said if you leave and you're coming home, where are you coming home from? You're coming home, obviously, you're coming home from prayer, right? Since you're coming home for prayer and yet you still have to make the Havdalah on the cup, it shows that even though you said the prayer and even though we generally when the Gemara says something, we assume you did it right. If you didn't do it right, we'll mention that you didn't do it right, but we're assuming you did it right. So if you left and you went to the prayer, so we're assuming you said the prayer correctly the way you're meant to say it. And if you said it the way you're meant to say it, when you come back home, you should, if your prayer would be suffice, you wouldn't have to do it on the cup. Yet we tell you have to do it on the cup, proves that even if you say it in the synagogue, you still have to say it again on the cup.
So wouldn't you know that before because the fact that you have to make Havdalah in a cup of wine?
Why? How would you know that before? What do you mean? We know
Everybody does
maybe.
Everybody does tomorrow.
Yeah. Mhm. So what do I tell you as a Talmudic scholar? What's your big mistake that you just made?
Assumption.
You took something that you know today and you plugged it into a Talmudic discussion. It's a fatal error. Because you have to realize that today's customs, today's Jewish law, was based on the Talmudic discussion, and perhaps that law comes from a later part of the discussion, and you're trying to say it's basically saying how could you have a beginning of the discussion if there's already an end to the discussion? You're right, there's an end to the discussion.
No, so you're saying Havdalah didn't start then, and Marv didn't start at this point.
What?
Havdalah didn't start at this point, and Marv didn't start at this point.
Maybe, by the way, you should know that Ma'ariv, the evening prayer, originally was what's the word? Optional. You didn't have to. There was a certain time where we say that the custom became so strong that it became an obligation, but it only became an obligation because it's almost like the Jewish people as a whole accepted upon ourselves to do the evening prayer. The other two prayers we were obligated to begin with, but this one is something that we kind of accepted upon ourselves. Understand? Good.
Which is saying that at this point in time, it could be that Marv is optional.
It could be, perhaps. Perhaps. I actually like your deduction, I think, is somewhat accurate, because you would be saying, but if you don't have to daven Ma'ariv, sorry, if there's a pot, the Gemara seems to be suggesting that there is a possibility to
Not having Ma'ariv.
not daven Ma'ariv and do Havdalah. Correct. And so therefore it could be that it's suggesting that possibility may in fact exist. All right? Kenai Nahore. Weiter gegangen. Where are we? Good. So the first thing we learned, we're going to pass. Second thing, bracha te'una kois. We also established that the Havdalah blessing requires a cup of wine. You can't just put a Havdalah blessing and just say the Havdalah blessing on its own. Like sometimes you can say other blessings on their own. But the Havdalah blessing cannot be on its own. You must do the Havdalah blessing while you have a cup of wine.
What blessing do you do on its own? What blessing do you just say?
Lightning, make a bracha for lightning.
You see the lightning?
Yeah, you see lightning, you say a blessing on lightning. You don't have to pour a cup of wine and then say a blessing on lightning. There's many blessings you don't have to say with wine.
Are you saying you're putting the blessing onto the wine? You're drawing the blessing onto the
No, the wine, the certain blessings require you to be holding a cup of wine while saying those blessings. Right? Certain blessings. Not all blessings, certain blessings. And therefore, the Gemara is deducing from that statement that the Havdalah, in fact, requires you to be holding a cup of wine while you're saying the blessing of Havdalah. Again, the blessing of Havdalah, which is taking out the Shabbat, is not a blessing on wine. It's two separate blessings. It's the blessing of wine. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, boirei pri hagofen. That's the blessing on wine. Then there's the blessing on Havdalah. It's Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, hamavdil ben kedesh lechol. Ben Eir lecheshach, ben Yisrael lewam, ben Yom Hashvi l'sheishes yemei hamas, Baruch atah Hashem, hamavdil ben kedesh lechol. So that blessing has nothing to do with wine. So why we have to hold a cup of wine? The answer is that the rabbis established that this blessing has to be done together with a cup of wine. And how do we know this? From the Brasadic quote. The Brasadic quote is how we know this. Why? Because we tell you that if you only have one cup, save it to do both. Why do I have to do both? Why don't I just do the Havdalah by itself right now without the cup of wine? And I'll do the cup of wine when I do the grace after meals. Then I'll have the cup of wine. Right? The very fact that it tells you should do both and wait, you should wait to do both, proves that you need to do Havdalah while holding a cup of wine. As a matter of fact, when we do the Havdalah in the Shemona Esrei, in the prayer, in the silent prayer that we say in the evening, when we include Havdalah, we do not hold a cup of wine in the middle of Shemona Esrei. We're not using a cup of wine. So there, we're doing the Havdalah ceremony, but we're doing it part of the prayer, and wine is not required. But when you say the actual blessing on Havdalah, as an independent Havdalah blessing, which you are required to do, that blessing must have a cup of wine. And how do we know that? The Brisa.
Question.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem logical. If this is the reason why we need the coast, then none of the other reasons, you can't use it for any of those other reasons. Because if that's the reason, then I don't need any of these other reasons why I'm saving the coast. I'm saving the coast
Right.
because I must use a coast for Havdalah.
Right.
That's the reason. So don't tell me all these other reasons.
I don't know what other reason. What other reason do we tell you?
I just said that the reason that we're listing
Yeah.
all these different reasons why.
Why what?
Why we have to wait to have the cup after Havdalah. Saying so, which one's greater? Is it
No.
more
So first of all, we're
respectful?
deducing
And who cares
again.
if it's more respectful? Now you need a cup for Havdalah, so you have one cup, you have to save it. Who cares what your other reasons are? It doesn't matter. If all the other
I don't know
cups-
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
You're talking about other conversation. I don't know what you're talking about. Where else did we give you another? First of all, we're trying to figure out.
Whether or not
Seemingly, the Gemara did not yet conclude as a fact that you must be holding a cup of wine when you make Havdalah. Well, this Brisa,
whether or not there's whether or not it's kavod, you need to save it because of kavod.
but that's talking about Kiddush, and that was a separate discussion. It wasn't talking about Havdalah.
So you need a cup of wine.
Again, who said that you need to hold a cup of wine while you're saying the Havdalah blessing? Who said that? Who said that? You said that. I said that because you're doing it today. That's what you're doing. Where did it come from? Somebody made it up? No. So here the Gemara is saying that based on this brisa, we can clearly see that a cup of wine is required. That is the proof that this is an absolute requirement. Because if it was not a requirement, we would have told you to say the blessing without the cup of wine.
This guy's been here for a long time.
Huh?
this Louis guy from Moshe has been here for a really long
Yes,
time.
that's one of our most dedicated students. We went back on Facebook just so that Luis could be part of this program. Yeah. Anyways, let's continue. Where are we? Okay, so that's the second thing we learned. We learned that the Havdalah blessing requires you to hold a cup of wine. Ushma mina, kaisha bracha tzarich shir. Here's another thing we learned. We learned that the cup of the blessing, which means the cup that you're making Havdalah, requires a particular amount. Now it doesn't say what that amount is, and I'm not sure if that amount is in fact. Well, Rashbam says it is a revius. Loig de ilay tema achi de tzarach shir lechalke trei. Okay, so first of all, he tells you that it's requiring a revius. However, which is a certain shi'ur that we use today, I think it's about 3 ounces approximately.
Why? Because if you could just,
Yeah.
use, it, if you just use a drop for $1,
Yeah.
you would split it.
Correct. If you again, the word shear just means a measurement. Now, even though the Rashbam tells us what that measurement is, the Gemara is not yet discussing a measurement. It's just discussing that there has to be a measurement, because if there was no measurement, you should be able to split it in half and do half for Havdalah, half for Birchas Hamazon. So the fact that it tells you don't have enough wine for whatever amount of wine you need, which means there is an amount of wine that you need and you don't have that amount. We don't know what that amount is yet. The Rashbam happens to tell us it's a revius, but what I would suggest is that actual requirement of revius is probably discussed somewhere else, not necessarily discussed here. What is discussed here, what the analysis of the Gemara here is determining there must be a minimum amount for Havdalah. Because if there was no minimum amount of Havdalah, how could you say he doesn't have enough wine for both? Split it in half. However small it is, you could always get smaller, right? If I have a 1 ounce, I could give a half an ounce to Havdalah, half an ounce to Birchas Hamazon. No matter what amount you have, you can always split it, right? There is no such thing in this world that cannot be split. Right? They used to say an atom, but then they've split atoms too. Yeah, they split the atoms and they split the subatomic particles, and now they get to the Higgs boson that you want to call it the God particle. I said, God's that small? What's wrong with you, man?
No, but also, I think for Birchas Hamazon, there was said that you
Yeah.
need a measurement.
What's that?
It was said that you need a measurement for Birchas Hamazon, that was already established.
Again, no, here the Gemara is establishing that there is, not necessary for Birchas Hamazon, that there is, I would assume that,
I'm assuming the other way. I'm assuming that you could use a drop for Abdallah and use the 3 lug for, use the revius for Birchas
yeah, but
Hamazon.
who says that a Birchas Hamazon requires a revius? You want to bring it in from your general knowledge. You know what I told you to do with your general knowledge? Take it and dump it in the garbage because it's going to confuse you with the Gemara discussion. Where does it say? Where are you deciding that a Birchas Hamazon requires a
Because if
revius?
not, you could use a tiny little bit for the Birchas Hamazon.
So both of them require a certain amount.
No, so for sure Birchas Hamazon is required. Birchas Hamazon-
Truth is, you could argue that only one of them requires no, but you could require either one. Why? You could require, maybe it's, on the contrary, if you think about it, you actually ask a good question to take the Gemara and challenge the whole Gemara's logic. You're telling me that this is proof that Havdalah requires a particular amount. Maybe it's not the case. Maybe Birchas Hamazon requires a particular amount, and Havdalah doesn't require a particular amount, but the reason you don't have enough, because if you take even a little bit for Havdalah, you won't have enough for Birchas Hamazon. So you just disproved the whole Gemara's proof. Brilliant guy, genius. We have to send him in a time machine back to the time of the Talmud and say, excuse me, your analysis has a flaw in it.
Or you could just say that anytime you're doing sanctification of anything, you need
Yeah.
a revius, which is what they're saying. So you could say, it doesn't matter, it's already
Yeah.
implicit that anytime you're going to do sanctification of a mitzvah,
Eh,
you need a revius. That's what
Okay,
we're
so
saying.
Yehuda over here is making a good argument where perhaps the Gemara is assuming, all right, perhaps the Gemara is assuming that whenever you make a particular mitzvah on a cup, it assumingly is the same thing. What do you mean? If the whole point of making a mitzvah on a cup is a form of honor and respect to that particular mitzvah, then we'd assume that each mitzvah would require the same amount. Meaning, we're not going to have one. Why would Havdalah require less than Birchas Hamazon? The cup, the whole point of the cup is to honor Havdalah and to honor Birchas Hamazon, which means they both have the exact same purpose. If they both have the same purpose, we would assume that they either both would have a shear or both won't have a shear. Right? That's how he's answering the.
Also, but then it would say that
Yeah.
for Kiddush and for the second day also we have the same thing. That if you only have enough for the first day,
Yeah.
if you only have enough for one cup for the first day and the second day, right? So that means that.
So first of all, you're going into something from last page, which is not relative. That's not the Talmud's analysis. You're going to Kiddush. We're not analyzing Kiddush right now. We're analyzing Havdalah. And by the way, your proof from Kiddush is from an Amoraic sage, which technically the Gemara could argue with. But what you are doing legitimately is connecting the logic to the concept of Kiddush, which means that the very fact that we tell you should make Kiddush Friday night and ignore the day would also suggest that Kiddush has a minimum.
So my point.
However, the Gemara right now is dealing with the analysis of the Tanaic quote, not with the ramifications of the Amoraic discussion we had on the previous page. And therefore, we have to stick to what the Talmud's discussing now, although I think it is legitimate and actually good that you're noticing that this logic should technically plug in back there. Although you might even suggest that the fact that Havdalah would need a revius, and the fact that Birchas Hamazon would need a revius, both of them are meant to honor a particular mitzvah. We would assume that this is a blanket rule for every mitzvah that covers it, which would include Kiddush too.
So my point
Right?
is that the fact that they
And again, and it would be stronger to argue it from here, because over here we're deducing it from a Tanaic sage, whereas before you're trying to deduce it from an Amoraic sage, and a Tanaic sage has greater authority over the Amoraic sage.
So my whole point with this is that this being
Yeah.
a Tanaic statement, that,
Yeah.
and the Gemara needing to answer from that Havdalah
Yeah.
needs a revius.
Yeah.
It means that it wasn't a blanket statement known yet that you need a revius for.
Well, nothing was, again, the Talmud, nothing is known, nothing's taken for granted in the Talmud. Everything needs to have a source. So right now, the Gemara is, as a matter of fact, the reason why you probably need a revius for Kiddush and for Havdalah and for Birchas Hamazon could perhaps be from this discussion right here in the Talmud. Okay, you know this as fact, that we always have to have a revius for wine, for Kiddush, for Havdalah, for everything. Even for the chuppah, and when people get married, we have to have a certain amount of wine. It could very well be, I'm not saying this is a fact, but it could very well be that the entire source of this requirement is right here in the Talmud. And that's why Jews do this all around the world, in everything, even by a bris, we have a revius wine, because the Talmud concludes. Now, once we conclude that is the case by Kiddush, by Havdalah, and therefore we're also assuming it's by Birchas Hamazon, it seems like a blanket rule. Whenever you have a cup of wine over a mitzvah, this should be a blanket rule for that situation. It shouldn't be different.
How could it not be that it's from this brisa that we're learning these things? He's saying these are the 8 things we learned from this brisa.
Yeah, but here we're
Havdalah.
specifically speaking. The truth is, hold on a second. I want to take back, and Yehuda made a good point. Look at the wording in the Gemara. It says Shema Mina Bracha Tune Kais. We learn from here that a blessing requires a cup. Not necessarily. We didn't say Havdalah Tune Kais. In the first one, we say Hamavdil B'Tzviyut Tzarech Shi Havdalah Kais. Here it says, doesn't say Hamavdil Tune Kais. It says Bracha Tune Kais. And when you're saying a blessing, which seems to be any of the blessings that require a cup of wine, require a cup, right? Ushma Mina Kaishel Bracha Tzarech Shir. And the cup of a blessing, which means whenever you have to make a blessing while holding a cup, that cup needs it. So if you look at the wording, it might actually be the wording itself.
It's a kasal bracha.
First of all, it's interesting because the Rashbam says Shema Mina Bracha Tune Kais is talking about Birchas Hamazon, not even Havdalah. Ushma Mina Kaishel Bracha Tzarech Shir, Revius Lug. Yeah. Very interesting.
I'm going to make another crazy guess.
Yes, he's going to make a guess. Yes.
Tosfos only mentioned 7 and not 8, because the 8th one he learned out from somewhere else, and he doesn't like when it's over here with this. That's part of this, because there's another source for one of them, and therefore Tosfos doesn't mention that.
Could be.
I'm guessing.
Okay. Well, you know how you're going to determine whether what you're saying is correct or incorrect. Learn every Tosfos. Learn all the Tosfos. No, do it. Learn all the Tosfos. Read through them. Understand them. And then let's see how you'll do. All right, good. Let's continue. I want to finish all the things that we learned from here. Let's continue. Ushmamina, we also learned from this Brsatic quote, Hamevarech tzarech sheyitim. We also learned that a person that makes a blessing over a cup must actually drink from that cup. He must taste from that cup. Right? Why?
No, you can just make the bracha on Havdalah. not drink
You
it,
could
it's
make the
like-
Havdalah, not drink the cup, then do Birchas HaMazon, and then you'll be good to go. So it shows that you would have to drink it, right? You would have to drink the cup, yeah.
Wouldn't it be obvious because you're making a bar for your guffin?
Not necessarily. No. It could be you're saying Bari Priya, or who says maybe you don't, maybe you wouldn't say Bari Priya Gofen if you're not drinking it. It could be. I mean, the very fact that we say that there is no option, essentially we're saying there is no option to do it any other way, that essentially teaches you that you have to drink from the cup. Yeah, so you have to drink from the cup of wine as well. You can't just say the blessing holding the cup. It's not good enough. You have to drink. Ushmamina, we also learn from here, Tamoy Pogmoy, that the second you taste the cup of wine, you're poigim in the cup, which means that you could, once somebody drinks from a cup of wine, you could no longer use that for a ritual, which actually is the final rule today as well. If you have any ritual that you need to do in Judaism over a cup of wine, if anybody tasted from that cup of wine, you cannot drink from that. You do the ritual on that cup of wine. It shows a level of it's a disrespect. You're giving like used leftovers. Somebody's leftovers. You don't leftovers. You don't invite people from your friends and your relatives and say, I'm going to serve you yesterday's leftovers.
No.
You'd be like,
I mean,
excuse
no,
me?
why not?
Excuse me?
So that implies,
You're giving God your leftovers?
well, that implies that there's something about the nature of the wine,
Yeah.
the person tasting it, that the blessing changes or impacts, right? There's something about holding the cup of wine and saying the blessing.
Perhaps.
That, is
Well,
affecting the wine.
it also could be psychological. It could be something in your mind. It perhaps is something in your mind or something that portrays either respect or disrespect. Right? If you drink from a cup of wine, now that wine is considered somewhat leftovers from a previous wine. Now it's almost like you're offering, you're honoring God by leftovers. Like, come on.
Can you add to the wine and make it?
Yeah, doesn't Chabad do what?
Add a little bit.
So again, you're mentioning things that you know from outside of the Talmud in the Talmudic discussion. It is confusing. However, what you're saying is correct. Some people say that if you pour non-used wine into the used wine, it kind of freshens it up. Freshens it up. Yes, they do. Some people do. Yeah.
Wait,
Some
what's
people.
the halacha with that?
What's the halacha with what?
Can you add wine? Somebody make kiddush drinks half the cup. Can you add
In Shulchan Aruch, it does determine that, and I'm not sure what the source is, but we're right now having a Talmudic discussion, and in the Talmud, this discussion is not talking about that, and therefore I refuse to answer the question.
You answered the question.
No. Okay, let's continue. Where are we? Shmamina mavarach tzarech siyutin. Okay. Ushmamina, yes, shmamina. This is guy is shmamina. Ushmamina, and we also learn to'am mavdil. We also learn that if you ate anything, you still should say Havdalah. Now, where does this come from? The Rashbam has explained it. There is an opinion that you should always make Havdalah prior to eating. So if you eat after Shabbat prior to making Havdalah, then according to one opinion, you actually have to go to sleep, wait till the next day when you're hungry in the morning, then make Havdalah, and then eat. But this Brsatic quote indicates that is incorrect or is disputing that rule. And according to this Brsatic quote, even if you ate after Shabbos, you should still say Havdalah. How do we know this? Because it tells you to bench, right?
No, so we had a whole discussion about this yesterday.
Yeah. Now I don't really see how this is deduced or analyzed. How is this analyzed?
If this wasn't the case, then you would be able to string everything along, and you would not have any problem.
What would be? So I don't know what you're talking about.
You'd be able to.
Be able to do what?
You're at davening.
Yeah, you're praying. Yeah.
Praying. What are we trying to do? We're trying to keep the coast?
Again,
Oh, so
prove
you'd
to
be
me,
able to- you'd be able to-
stop, prove to me from this Brasadic quote that a person ate and then made Havdalah. That's essentially what he's saying. Somebody first ate or tasted something and then made Havdalah after tasting something. Where do you see that?
Because he makes the dollar.
Where do you see that?
He makes the dollar first, and then he benches. So that means
No, it says to bench first and then do Havdalah. But yeah, that's what it says. The truth is, the wording is you leave it after the food. It doesn't say after the birchas hamazon, but after the food, which means you can finish eating. So essentially, you should finish eating, then bench, then do Havdalah. Yeah, that seems to be what it's saying.
From the quote,
Yeah.
you can't just not bench, go home,
Yeah.
make Havdalah, and then bench. That's what we learned. Because if you could do that, you'd have no problem. So
you would have a cup of wine for the bencher.
you wouldn't. So if you ate,
If
you
you-
didn't bench. You
Yeah.
eat. So
Yeah.
you can't go from eating. Don't bench.
Again, we're trying to prove that somebody ate prior to
don't bench.
Havdalah. We're trying to say somebody ate prior to Havdalah, and seemingly, because it says to leave it till after the food, it doesn't say to leave it after the blessing of the food, but to leave it after the food, which means you're still eating.
You're eating.
Right,
And you say to yourself, I don't have enough wine for both, so I'm not going to bench right now.
right.
I'm going to go straight into.
Well, no, hold on,
That would be eating and eating.
So why
before
can't why can't again? If you look at the brisa, why can't I suggest that the brisa is telling you that you should immediately bench and then say Havdalah on the cup that you bench first? I mean, do everything right away. And the whole chiddush is that you don't do first Havdalah and then bench, but you should bench first and then say Havdalah.
Correct.
But how do you know the guy actually ate something prior to that?
Eating.
Who said you're eating? The guy said he came back from shul. Look at the wording. It says he came back from the synagogue and he only has one cup. It says you should leave the cup till after the food. The only thing is it uses the terminology till after the food, not till after the grace after meals, but till after the meal itself, and therefore it seems like he's going to actually have a meal. But then we have a problem. How could you eat before Havdalah, which we also discussed in the past?
We just said that.
Man, this is complicated. Sheesh. What's going on here? Yehuda,
We just said
what's going on here?
that this we're learning out what we learned from here. So we learned
Yeah.
that you can't eat first. So if I would, we're sitting
You
here.
can't eat first
You
what?
can't eat before we make Havdalah. That's what we learned out from this. We just said that. That's what we did.
Where does it say we learned that you can't make Havdalah? You can't eat. Where does it say? Where does it say you can't eat? We didn't learn that here. Where do we say that? No, we didn't.
What's this one mean out here?
No, we didn't say it. Where did we learn that?
What we just said.
We said if you tasted the wine, then you cannot. Then the next one is if you ate, you could still make Havdalah. I mean, if you ate, not that you could eat. It doesn't say anywhere you could eat. Again, we're trying to tell you that we analyze from the Brasadic quote that to prove you that if you happen to eat prior to Havdalah, you can still make Havdalah during that night. You don't have to wait till the next morning like the other opinion. That's what we determined from the Brasadic quote. Where in the Brasadic quote do you have proof that the guy ate prior to Havdalah? Look at the Brasadic quote. Look at the quote. Tell me where you see there that he actually clearly says that the guy ate prior to Havdalah. Where do you see it? You see it somewhere? You don't see it. You don't see it.
I don't see it either.
Yeah. So as I said, it's seemingly the brisa says you should leave it till after the food, but not till after the blessing on the food. So seemingly we're talking about the guy waiting till after. Yeah. Huh?
So that's so he's saying this isn't specifically a malava malka, not shalosh.
No, this seems to be an extended Shal Shudas because we wouldn't be allowed to start a new meal.
Right.
Seemingly.
No, but if it's
Seemingly, you
shalosh-
would not be able to start a new meal, but it could be that
but
you
if
could
it's shalosh
continue the other
shudas,
meal.
If it's shalosh shudas,
Yeah.
that means that he's allowed to eat in that time. So of course you'll be able to make Havdalah. So how's the Gemara pulling off from there?
Well, as I said, there is an opinion that if a person ate Saturday night after Shabbat was over,
It's not over. That's
then-
the whole point. Shalosh shudas isn't over.
You're right. Shabbos, no, Shabbos is over because he davened Ma'ariv. Now he's still in the middle of a meal. He's still in the middle of Shalosh Shudas. But Shabbos is over because he davened Ma'ariv and he said Havdalah in Ma'ariv. We said he said Havdalah in
So
Ma'ariv.
saying, according to that opinion, even if you're eating permitted food, you still would wait till the next day?
Correct. There's an opinion that would suggest that. And this brisa disagrees with that opinion.
That's the answer.
Huh?
That's the answer.
Again, seemingly that's the way it works. I think we may have figured out how to reorganize this Talmudic passage. All right. Ushmamino. You have Mendel had a question. Correct. Because we're assuming that, because obviously you wouldn't be saying it if you didn't have it. Yeah. But that perhaps was discussed in a different Talmud to begin with. You have to realize that unlike Western literature, where you're taught to write as if the person you're writing to doesn't know anything. In the Talmud, it's the exact opposite. The Talmud writes as if you know everything. So if there was a discussion previously in the Talmud that determines something, then we're assuming that that's what it is. All right?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
did we learn that we are holding the coast from benching and we're using it at Havdalah? Is that what we learned?
We are.
We're not using the coast.
What do you mean
at
we're not?
benching.
We are using. We're using it for both together. We're holding the cup during benching, and it's benching over. Instead of just saying hagafen and drinking it, you say hagafen and Havdalah, and meaning you're doing it all in one cup. So the whole thing in one. 5 birds with one rock.
We make Havdalah when we come home.
Jewish.
Havdalah when we come home.
Jews.
Jews.
Yeah,
Gather
Jews.
Jewish argument.
Man, all right. Let's finish the shmaminos, and then we will go on to the next
So we
thing.
said that the reason they got this was because according to that opinion, if you eat anything at all on Motzei Shabbos,
Yeah.
you have to make Havdalah on the
There
next day.
is an opinion that if you eat anything Saturday night after Shabbat is over, you would have to wait till the next morning prior to eating to make Havdalah.
So according to this
And this
brisa-
brisa clearly disagrees with that opinion. So,
So what's the reason in the other opinion if you're eating a permitted food that you wouldn't have to?
huh?
If you're eating permitted food on Motzei
Yeah.
Shabbos, why would you have to wait to make Havdalah till the next day?
Well, why don't you go to that Gemara and see the reason, and maybe the reason that you're saying has no, you're making an argument basing on nothing. Basing on what? You feel that this is much, what's your argument based on?
That why?
You're trying to enter a Talmudic discussion that's somewhere else in the Talmud that has nothing to do with here and make as if you are arguing with that, but you don't even know what that says.
It has to say
let me
that.
tell you something, there's a very important aspect of an argument. You actually have to know what the other person's saying. You can't argue with somebody if you don't know what they're saying.
It has to be saying that because they're saying that it's not permitted.
Do you know what they're saying in that other thing? They're saying it's not permitted. Do you know why they said it's not permitted? No. So how could you argue why it should be permitted when you have no idea why they said it shouldn't?
Because the food, you're allowed to eat the food at that time.
So what? How do you know that that's even a factor in the argument? Because you don't. You don't know that it's a factor. It could not be a factor in the argument.
Gemara says that?
Go look it up. It says over here, Daf Kuf. It's in our Gemara, Daf Kuf Vav Amud Beis, which is on the next page. Shkoyach Zeu. No, nice. All right. When you go to there and you understand their reason, now you can argue against their reason. If you don't understand their reason, you can't argue against their reason, right? As I told you, number one rule: if you're in an argument, you have to know what the other person's saying. You can't argue with if you don't know what he's saying. You can't say, "How could you say that?" You don't even know what he said. It doesn't make sense.
Unless you work for CNN.
Unless you work for CNN, then you're good to go. You can do whatever you want, right? They could say whatever they want. They do say whatever they want. Whatever gets more ratings, they say. So, doesn't make a difference. It's true, not true, makes sense, doesn't make sense, right? They have a very dedicated following, to the grave, Good. So you could learn that, and then next week when we get to that, we'll discuss it again. All right? Ushmamina. Another thing we learned from this Brasadic quote, that you could do 2 separate holy rituals. We can do 2 separate holy rituals on 1 cup. That's that. That's the second to last Shamamina. Ushmamina.
What was this one?
That you could do 2 separate rituals on 1 cup of wine. You don't have to do.
We don't bundle mitzvahs? The whole discussion of this literally 2 Dafs ago.
I can't get anything past this guy. We just learned that you can't do 2 mitzvahs in 1 cup.
Yeah, it's from the same day.
So obviously this person might disagree with that. Now you're going to ask me, how is this different than that? Well, when we said you can't bundle up, what did we say? What did we say that with? With what was it referring to?
Referring to Yaknahaz.
Huh? Right. So what was the problem?
Someone said, why do you do Kiddush and Abdullah in the same cup? So the reason why you can't do that.
When we do it on the same cup.
If
You
you
make
make
Kiddush for the next day and Abdullah in the same cup. It's Yom Tov falls after Shabbos.
Yeah.
You can't make Abdullah on Shabbos and Kiddush for Pesach in the same cup.
We do it on the same cup. What are you talking about?
You do Abdullah and Kiddush in the same cup?
Yeah, it's called Yaknahaz. So what? Okay. So again, you're making a good point. You have a good point. I want you to go back to that page, figure out when it said you can't do it, and see if it contradicts this or not. Yeah. Anyways, good. Weitergegangen. Let's. So that's that. And the last Shmamino Beishamai v'libid Rabbi Yehuda, that this opinion is Beishamai according to Rabbi Yehuda, etc. And that itself is a question. How will we quote? How is this Bryce quoting Beishamai? But it determines that it is quoting Beishamai. It's a little bit of a more detailed discussion. And my only question is right now, should we try to finish the quota for this week, or should we do it tomorrow? It's very short. You know, let's do it very short. I'm going to do it very short.
Quoting an Amoraic sage.
Huh?
Explain how Bryce says quoting an Amoraic sage.
A Bryce is holding is quoting an Amoraic sage. Who said that? Who's an Amoraic sage? Beishamai is an Amoraic sage? Definitely not. Okay, who else? No, what are you talking about? They're both Amoraic sages, 100%. Anyways, Rav Ashi says, Tamoy Pogmoy, the Koishel Bracha Tzarech Shir. Rav Ashi clearly says that if you taste from a cup of wine, you're ruined it. You can never say you can never do the ritual on it. And he also says that Koishel Bracha requires a shir. Sorry. I misquoted what he's saying. He's saying, Tamoy Pogmoy, the Koishel Bracha Tzarech Shir, the concept of that if you drink from it, it ruins it. And the Kaisha Bracha requires shir chada milsahi, it is actually one thing, which means it is really one rule in each other. Meaning the reason that you cannot drink from a cup is because if you drink from a cup, then you ruin the shir. There's not enough wine in it because you just drank from it. In other words, according to Rav Ashi, what happens if you have a cup that's double the shir and you drink from it? You should be able to use it. So Rav Ashi basically says if you drink from a cup, you could still use it for wine as long as you still have a revius. He does not hold of poigim at all. He only holds that you require amount, and it says they're both the same. Yeah? Mishum the Kaisha Bracha Tzarech Shir. Yeah? Yeah. Rabbi Akiva Baridi, however, Rabbi Akiva Baridi doesn't, he does it. Idi kopid achatzva pagimo. Even a big, like a jug, right? If somebody drank from a jug, he wouldn't drink from it. Rav Idi Bar Shisha kopid akoso pagimo. If he had a cup and somebody drank from it, even if it had more than a revius, he still did not drink from it. Mar Bar Avashi kopid afilu achavita pagimo. He said even if somebody drank out of a barrel, a massive barrel of wine, he would not make kiddush on any of the wine in that barrel because it's considered pagan. So you have a bit of a dispute here. There's a bit of a dispute here between various sages. One sage says that there is no problem with with making kiddush on leftover wine. There's no problem according to him. The only thing is you need a revius. So if you have exactly a revius and you drink it, you won't have a revius anymore, right? So he basically holds that it's one and the same, which means if you have a big cup and you drink a little bit, he says no problem, you can make kiddush, you have a revius, right? That's what he holds. But there's another few rabbis that disagree, and one even says if you have a massive barrel and somebody drinks from the massive barrel, it's still going to be.
Is that possibly why Tosfos only lists 7? Because this is a combo?
Well, according to him, it's a combo.
So I'm saying that Tosfos only mentions
It could
7.
be, but it could be. It could be possible. It is possible. I don't know if it, but it is possible. It's possible. I did not read the Tosfos yet, but it's possible. Hold on, we have. You're right. Yeah. So it could be that within one of the Tosfos, and he will explain the difference between the various opinions, and it could be that that's why he says less, etc. Very possible. Good. Mashiach now, we have, so the Talmud will end there for the Talmud right now. If anybody has questions here, please feel free to ask, and we'll ask our people over here to go through the various comments and see if any comment actually has something worth answering. Remember, in this particular program, we only answer questions on the subject at hand, and we don't answer questions that random people tell me about Muhammad being a pedophile. I don't know what they're doing.
It's a small tangent. We had mentioned something about the bracha of
I don't know. That's what they said over there. I never met him. You met him? No, I never met him. I never met him. The writing is. Yeah, anyone?
You have a question?
Hey, what's this one here? Oleg, sometimes good questions. These things worth putting it up there.
Yeah, should I put it up?
Yeah, put it on. Why not? What is it? I don't even know what it is. Oh. Sometimes I wonder, with all these little rules and regulations, what is the ultimate purpose for all of this? And isn't it more direct going without getting lost in the weeds of all these details? So I'll give my answer, and then you'll give your answer. All right? From a spiritual perspective.
First small, then small.
Imagine somebody tells you, let's say I just bought a Mitsubishi car. It's a very, very, very good car, right? Yeah. Imagine you're working in a Mitsubishi factory and they give you this list of detailed engineering specifications, and they tell you, don't you dare do anything else other than what it says in the protocol, because these are the engineering specifications, right? And you say, what do you need all this stuff for? I'll just switch the wire, I'll switch this for that, I'll put this in here, and everything's going to be good. What do I need to do exactly what they tell me? The answer is that these specifications were very detailed, analyzed to every detail, and every detail was extremely important. And if you think that God, who created this complex universe, just wants you to serve him in a very simple, dull, or even not a dull, but an exciting but made up way, then I think that you're talking to the wrong God, because the God that made this complicated universe has very specific specifications on how you can accomplish what he wants you to accomplish. And the more you simplify it, the more you're basically saying that I don't really want to deal with the real God, I want to deal with the one that I made up in my head. Right? Did you make up a God in your head? Maybe you did, but maybe you didn't, maybe you didn't. But that's the fact. If you're going to deal with a God that is the real God, you have to be very specific on every specification to do it correctly and not mess around, and each one's very important. As a matter of fact, I actually saw a documentary where there was an airplane that they did some type of repair, and in this repair, whoever was doing the repair, professionals and everything, when they put back a particular piece in the plane, there's meant to be 2 sets of screws, right? And they only put 1 set of screws. They said, well, the screw's a screw, come on, it's strong, it's good, it is, good. Right, about a month later, the plane crashed. They did a massive investigation. They realized that this particular thing, when the company was doing testing, they noticed that if you put 1 set of screws, because the plane keeps on getting more pressure and less pressure, right? When it goes up, there's more pressure inside and less pressure outside. Then it comes down, and then it's the opposite. And because it's constantly expanding, coming in and out, so they actually, when they tested, they had these pressure machines that they tested so in order to ensure that the plane's safe, right? So when they were doing it, they realized that if you put 1 set of screws, after about 50 times, the screws break. But if you put 2 sets of screws, then it could last for years and years and years, right? So this idiot decided, 1 set of screws, 2 sets of screws. He didn't realize that 2 sets of screws was there because otherwise the plane wasn't safe, and it killed a bunch of people because this idiot didn't follow the exact specification. He's like, 1 set of screws, 2 set of screws. No, he killed a bunch of people because he put 1 set of screws instead of a couple little screws in the thing, and everybody's dead.
That's kind of what happened with the vaccine in a way, actually.
Huh?
That's kind of what happened with the COVID vaccine.
COVID vaccine too, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, that model
Anyways.
works. That model works for a lot of biotechs, I'll tell you.
Good.
Except it's got the specifications there too. All right.
No, my answer is that if you're building a countertop and you're 1/4 centimeter off, who really cares? If you're building,
But again, first of all, it depends, because if you're building a countertop, right, and you say, it's only a centimeter off, it could be that centimeter off changes the whole weight placement, who knows what, and distribution. It could be. No, again, it depends. If something's not well figured out, so then, if you're dealing with a situation that's not well figured out, so usually if you do something a little different, it's not a big deal. But if you're dealing with something that's extremely important and extremely, has extreme consequences, right? Then you try to figure it out perfectly, and yes, your specifications need to be extremely precise.
That was my point.
And it's the same thing with God. When we're dealing with a God who created this whole universe, every detailed specification is extremely accurate and important, right? And if you miss even a little one, you're like, so I'll eat pig one day. Yeah, well, that's it. You just messed up your whole spiritual aura for the rest of your life, for the rest of eternity, perhaps. Boom, gone, because you decided you're going to taste a little pig, and God told you not to. Yeah, there could be ways to correct it. There could be ways to correct it and whatever it is. But even those ways to correct it have to be done with the specifications. But what's if you don't end up correcting it correctly?
You missed it even further.
And that's it. What if you're driving and you make a bad maneuver, right? So that maneuver could potentially cause you a crash and potentially kill you, right? Yes, sometimes there's a way to correct the maneuver, but you're not going to put yourself into a maneuver that could potentially kill you with the intention of maybe you're going to get out of it, because maybe you won't get out of it, right? Don't mess around, man.
Yeah, my point was I'll be a lot more comfortable
Don't overcorrect either.
if my contractor said I was a quarter of an inch off with your countertops as opposed to a brain
So again, you have to know exactly. Brain children could be a millimeter off and kill a person. Yeah.
This is what it is. This is brain surgery.
Yeah, you have to understand that this is serious business. It's not a joke.
Also, I have another question. If somebody, what's the law that two people ate bread and third person, does he need mezainis or shakal?
Huh?
If two people ate bread,
Yeah.
the third person to make a point, does he need to have mezainis or shakal spent?
I don't know. You know what it says in the Gemara?
What?
Don't ask a teacher a question on a subject that's not being discussed.
It's what a couple one right here. Alakais.
It's not that. Nothing. We're not discussing the rules of mezumim. We're talking about.
The Gemara can go from here to there. I can go from one.
All right, that's it for today. We'll see you tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem. If hopefully our producer technical engineer producer will keep on coming on time, and we'll keep on giving you people the ability. You put the chat?
You'll have to put the link on your YouTube. You have to put the link on
They
the
don't
video
see it
on your
now?
YouTube channel. I couldn't add it automatically, so you'll just have to
So no, it says when you put that
I
R.
put it in the chat, but it's
Yeah.
not in the description of the video on your YouTube.
On the YouTube.
We'll add it to
But
that.
the other ones have it? If you just saw in the chat, there is a link to a WhatsApp group. That WhatsApp group is the class WhatsApp group. If you join that WhatsApp group, you might be able to stay more connected with the class, and Bezrat Hashem will, join it. If you're interested in this class on a regular basis, click that and join the group. Zeo. Sei gesund. Have a good